The November wind howled through the gaps in the rotting window frame, a mournful whistle that sounded exactly like my own despair given a voice. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the digital clock as it flickered from 2:46 a.m. to 2:47 a.m. The room smelled of damp drywall and Vicks VapoRub, a scent that should have been comforting, but now only triggered a sharp spike of adrenaline in my gut. Beside me, Maya shifted in her sleep, her small chest hitching with a wheeze that rattled deep in her lungs. She was 5 years old, clutching a stuffed rabbit with a missing ear, and she was the only thing in this godforsaken world that kept my heart beating. I rubbed my face with hands that felt like sandpaper. My knuckles were raw from scrubbing dishes at the bistro earlier that day, and my back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. The temperature in the studio apartment hovered around 50 degrees. The landlord had promised to fix the radiator 3 days ago, but promises didn't keep a sick child warm. I pulled the thin, scratchy wool blanket up to her chin, tucking it around her shoulders with obsessive care. On the scratched laminate of the kitchen table, illuminated by the orange glow of a streetlight outside, lay the letter. It was heavy, cream-colored stationery that looked ridiculously out of place next to my stack of unpaid utility bills. Notice of petition for full custody. My ex-wife, Sarah, hadn't wanted Maya when she was a colicky baby screaming through the night. But now that Sarah had married a hedge fund manager with a sterile mansion in Connecticut, she wanted a prop for her family photos. She had the lawyers. She had the money. I had $74 in my checking account and a shift at the Sapphire Lounge that I couldn't afford to lose. I should have called a lawyer the second she threatened me. I should have documented every missed visit, every birthday she ignored. But I didn't know then that the truth doesn't matter in courtrooms as much as the billable hours do. Maya coughed, a wet, hacking sound that tore through the silence. I froze, my hand hovering over her forehead. She was burning up again. The fever had returned with a vengeance, radiating off her skin like heat from pavement in July. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice thin and reedy. "I'm here, baby," I soothed, smoothing her sweat-dampened hair back. "Go back to sleep." "Thirsty," she croaked. I went to the kitchenette, my socks sliding on the linoleum. I poured a glass of water, my hands trembling slightly, not from cold, but from a terrifying exhaustion that settled in my bones. I opened the fridge. It was a desolate landscape. A half-gallon of milk, a jar of pickles, and the antibiotic suspension the clinic had prescribed. I shook the bottle. Empty. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of my fatigue. I had miscalculated the doses, or maybe I had spilled some. It didn't matter. She needed more, and the 24-hour pharmacy on 4th Street wouldn't hand it over without a refill authorization and a copay I couldn't cover until payday on Friday. I checked my watch. 3:15 a.m. My shift at the Sapphire Lounge, an ultra-exclusive, members-only club where I worked strictly off the books as a fill-in bartender, started at 8:00 p.m., but the manager, a weasel named Gary, had texted me demanding I come in for a lunch prep shift at 11:00 a.m. because the regular barback had quit. If I missed it, I was fired. If I was fired, Sarah's lawyers would paint me as unemployed and unstable. I looked at the empty medicine bottle, then at the eviction notice under the custody papers. The walls were closing in, suffocating me. I needed money, fast. I needed to make myself indispensable to Gary today so I could ask for an advance. It was a humiliating, desperate plan, but dignity was a luxury I had sold long ago. I kissed Maya's forehead. "I'm going to fix this," I whispered to the dark. "I promise." The Sapphire Lounge was a different world, a pocket of velvet-draped silence insulated from the grime of the city. It smelled of expensive leather, aged mahogany, and the crisp metallic scent of money. By 1:00 p.m. the lunch rush was in full swing. I was moving on autopilot, polishing crystal tumblers until they gleamed, my mind still trapped in that freezing apartment with Maya. "Liam, table 4 needs a bottle of the 82 Petrus now," Gary hissed, snapping his fingers in my face. "And fix your tie. You look like you slept in a dumpster." "Right away," I said, my voice flat. I kept my head down, navigating the floor with the invisibility that service workers cultivate. The atmosphere in the lounge shifted abruptly at 1:23 p.m. It wasn't a sound, but a sudden drop in pressure, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The murmur of conversation died down. The clinking of silverware stopped. The double doors swung open, held by two men who looked less like security guards and more like natural disasters poured into Brioni suits. They wore earpieces and expressions of lethal boredom. They scanned the room, their eyes dissecting every patron, every waiter, every shadow. Then she entered. She was perhaps in her early 50s, though time seemed to have refined her rather than aged her. She was petite, standing no taller than 5'3", yet she commanded the space with the gravitational pull of a black hole. She wore a suit of dove-grey silk that shimmered under the recessed lighting, the cut so precise it looked like it had been sculpted onto her body. A single brooch, a jade dragon with ruby eyes, was pinned to her lapel. But it was her face that stopped me cold. High cheekbones, pale skin that looked like porcelain, and lips painted a deep blood red. Her hair was a sleek curtain of obsidian cut in a sharp bob, with a single defiant streak of silver running through the left side, and her eyes. They were dark, bottomless pools of intelligence and ruthlessness. They were the eyes of someone who had seen everything the world could inflict and decided to inflict it back. She didn't walk, she glided, moving with the fluid grace of a predator that knows it has no natural enemies. "Mother of God," the bartender beside me whispered, dropping a lime twist. "That's Lady Tanaka." I didn't know the name then. I didn't know that she controlled shipping lanes from Tokyo to Seattle, or that the men flanking her were sworn to die before letting a hair on her head be disturbed. All I saw was a woman who looked as lonely as she was terrifying. She took a seat at the corner booth, the one reserved for VIPs who didn't want to be seen. Her bodyguards took up positions that blocked the exits without seeming to. Gary was sweating, practically vibrating with nerves as he rushed over, bowing too low, his obsequiousness painful to watch. She ordered tea, just tea. I watched her from the bar. She sat with a posture so rigid it looked painful, her gaze fixed on the middle distance. She looked like a queen in exile, surrounded by subjects she despised. 10 minutes later, the trouble started. A group of investment bankers at the center table had been drinking lunch since noon. They were loud, boorish, and emboldened by a midday whiskey courage. One of them, a man with a flushed face and a tie that cost more than my car, stood up and stumbled toward the restrooms. He veered off course, colliding with the edge of Lady Tanaka's table. The tea splashed onto the grey silk of her sleeve. The room went silent. Absolute, tomb-like silence. The bankers laughed. "Watch it, sweetheart," the drunk man slurred, leaning over her table, his hand reaching out to brush the wet silk on her arm. "You're taking up a lot of space for a little lady." Lady Tanaka didn't flinch. She didn't move away. She simply turned her head, looking at his hand on her sleeve with mild distaste, as if a cockroach had crawled across her. Her bodyguards moved. It was a subtle shift of weight, a hand reaching into a jacket. I saw the tension in their shoulders. They were going to break him, right here, right now. If they did, the police would come. The club would close for the day. I would lose my shift. I wouldn't get the advance. Maya wouldn't get her medicine. I didn't think. I acted. I vaulted over the bar top, landing silently on the plush carpet. I was there in 3 strides, interposing myself between the drunk banker and Lady Tanaka, just as the bodyguard on the left began to draw a weapon. "Sir," I said, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. I gripped the banker's arm firmly, turning him away from the booth. "I think you've mistaken this table for the cloakroom. Let me help you back to your seat." "Get your hands off me, busboy," the banker spat, swinging a heavy, clumsy fist at my head. I saw it coming. I could have dodged, but dodging would have meant stepping aside, exposing the woman behind me to his flailing. So I took it. His fist connected with my cheekbone, a sickening crack that exploded into white light behind my eyes. I stumbled back, tasting copper, but I didn't fall. I stayed planted between him and the Queen. "That is enough," I said, my voice dropping an octave, channeling every ounce of fatherly authority I used when Maya tried to run into the street. "Sit down." Security from the club finally descended, dragging the shouting banker away. Gary was there instantly, apologizing frantically to Lady Tanaka, his face pale as a sheet. I stood there, swaying slightly, wiping a trickle of blood from the corner of my mouth with the back of my hand. My head swam. "You," a voice said. It was soft, like silk, over steel. I turned. Lady Tanaka was looking up at me. Her dark eyes were locked onto my face, analyzing the bruise already forming on my cheek, the frayed cuffs of my cheap white shirt, the exhaustion etched under my eyes. "I'm sorry about the disturbance, ma'am," I managed to say, my jaw aching. "I'll bring fresh tea." "You took a blow intended for me," she stated. It wasn't a question. Her accent was slight, elegant. "Why?" "He was drunk," I said, feeling the room spinning. "And your men. They would have made a mess. I can't afford for this place to close today." She tilted her head, studying me. It felt like she was reading the text of the eviction notice in my pocket through the fabric of my pants. "You cannot afford it." "I have a daughter," I said. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "I need this job." She stared at me for a long beat. The air between us crackled with something electric, a strange recognition. It was as if she saw the desperation I was trying so hard to hide, the terrified father beneath the waiter's uniform. She reached into her purse, a small black alligator clutch, and pulled out a linen napkin. She didn't hand it to me. She reached up and dabbed the blood from my lip herself. Her fingers were cool, her touch surprisingly gentle. "A father who bleeds for strangers to save his child," she murmured almost to herself. "Rare." She stood up then. The movement was abrupt. "I am leaving." Gary looked like he was going to faint. "But, madam—" "Your tea." She ignored him. She walked past me, pausing for only a fraction of a second. She didn't look at me, but her voice drifted back. Low and distinct, meant only for my ears. "The debt is noted." And then she was gone, sweeping out of the room with her guards in her wake, leaving the Sapphire Lounge in a stunned, vibrating silence. I stared at the door, my cheek throbbing, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I didn't know what she meant. I didn't have time to wonder. I had to finish my shift, get my money, and get home to Maya. I didn't know then that the debt she spoke of was worth more than the entire building I was standing in. I didn't know that in exactly 3 weeks, when my world finally collapsed, she would be the only thing standing between me and the abyss. All I knew was that my face hurt, and for the first time in months I felt like someone had actually seen me. The heavy steel door of the Sapphire Lounge clicked shut behind me, sealing the warmth and wealth inside. I was left in the alley, where the smell of wet garbage and diesel fumes replaced the aroma of aged cognac. The November rain hadn't let up. It fell in sheets, icy and relentless, soaking through my cheap white dress shirt within seconds. My cheek throbbed, a sharp, hot pulse where the banker's ring had split the skin. I leaned against the brick wall, my legs trembling. It wasn't fear exactly, it was the adrenaline crash. My hands shook as I wiped rainwater from my eyes. Gary hadn't fired me, but he'd made it clear I was toxic. "Go home, Liam. If I see your face before Friday, don't bother coming back." Friday, 3 days away. I had $74. Maya needed antibiotics tonight. I pushed off the wall, panic rising in my throat like bile. I had to get to the pharmacy. Maybe I could beg the pharmacist. Maybe I could pawn my watch. It was a knockoff, but it looked real enough in dim light. I started walking, my dress shoes slipping on the slick cobblestones. A shadow detached itself from the gloom at the mouth of the alley. It was a car, a Maybach S-Class, blacker than the night itself, idling with a low, menacing hum. It blocked the exit completely, a multi-$100,000 barricade between me and my daughter. I froze. My first instinct was violence. The banker had friends, and rich men didn't like being embarrassed. I shifted my weight, fists balling at my sides, ready to fight for a life that wasn't worth much. The rear window slid down. No sound, just the glass vanishing. "Get in, Liam." The voice was cool, crisp, and commanded instant obedience. Kaori Tanaka sat in the shadows of the back seat, her face illuminated by the blue light of a tablet. She didn't look at me, she didn't have to. I need to leave, like I said, the rain dripping from my nose. I have to get home. You have nowhere to go, she countered, sliding a finger across the screen. Your shift is over. Your manager is currently drafting an incident report to cover his liability, and you are standing in freezing rain with a concussion. She turned then. Her eyes were dark voids, assessing me like an asset on a ledger. Get in, or stay here and wait for the police to pick you up for assault. I imagine a custody battle is difficult to fight from a holding cell. The threat hit its mark. She knew. Somehow in the 20 minutes since I'd saved her, she knew. I opened the heavy door and slid into the warmth. The interior of the Maybach was a sensory deprivation tank designed for billionaires. The silence was absolute. The city noise severed the moment the door latched. The air was warm and smelled of expensive leather and faint jasmine. Kari Tanaka didn't offer a towel. She simply watched me, her gaze traveling over my soaked shirt and the bruising on my face. Liam O'Connor, she recited, glancing at the tablet again. Dishonorable discharge, no, general discharge under honorable conditions. Marine Corps, 2 tours, then a bouncer, a construction worker, and now, a fill-in bartender at a club you cannot afford to enter. You run fast background checks, I said, my voice tight. I felt exposed, dirty in the pristine cabin. Is that legal? I don't concern myself with legality. I concern myself with leverage. She set the tablet down on the leather seat. You stepped in front of a blow meant for me. Why? I told you, I said, shivering slightly despite the heat. I needed the job. Bullshit. The word was shocking coming from her, precise, elegant, and vulgar. Men like you don't risk their safety for minimum wage, she continued, her voice lowering. You moved like a soldier. You assessed the threat, neutralized the line of attack, and absorbed the impact. That was training, not panic. So I ask again, why? I looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the designer suit and the ice-cold demeanor, I saw something familiar. It was the same look I saw in the mirror every morning, exhaustion masked by discipline. Because he was a bully, I said quietly, and you were alone. It didn't look like your guards would get there in time to stop him touching you. Just to kill him after. She held my gaze for a long moment. And you object to killing? I object to unnecessary messes. Interesting. She reached into a cooler built into the console and pulled out a bottle of water, handing it to me. It was glass, cold, and heavy. My head of security, Kenji, thinks you are a plant, an assassin sent to gain my trust. I'm a guy with $70 and a sick kid, I snapped, cracking the seal on the water. If I were an assassin, I'd ask for a better advance. She almost smiled. It was a terrifying micro-expression. Perhaps. The silence stretched, filled with a tension that felt like a wire being pulled tight. I needed to leave. Every minute here was a minute Maya was burning up. Then a phone rang. It wasn't hers. It was a secure line built into the car's console. She pressed a button. Tanaka-sama, a male voice crackled over the speaker. He was speaking Japanese, fast and clipped. We are at the warehouse in District 4. The shipment is clear. No sign of the Russians. You can come down for the inspection. Kaori reached for the intercom button to reply. My stomach dropped. I knew that tone. I knew the cadence of forced calm. Don't, I said. She paused, her finger hovering over the button. She looked at me with lethal irritation. Excuse me? Don't go, I said, switching to Japanese. It was rusty, the accent rough from years of disuse, but the words were clear. He is lying. Listen to the background. Kaori froze. Her eyes widened, just a fraction. She looked at the speaker, then back at me. What do you hear? She asked in Japanese, testing me. Echo, I replied in English, wanting to be precise. He says he's at the warehouse, but his voice has no bounce. It's flat. He's outside. And just before he stopped speaking, wind. A lot of it. The District 4 warehouse is underground. There's no wind. I leaned forward, the leather creaking. He's not at the warehouse. He's at the docks, and if he's lying about the location, he's leading you into a kill box. Kaori stared at me. The silence in the car was deafening. She was processing the information at lightning speed, the logic, the acoustics, and the impossible fact that the American bartender spoke her language. She pressed the button. Her voice didn't waver. "Kenji," she said in Japanese, "change of plans. Bring the manifest to the hotel. I am feeling unwell." There was a pause on the line, a heartbeat of hesitation that screamed betrayal. "But, Tanaka-sama, everything is ready here." Did I stutter? "No, we will come to you." The line clicked dead. Kari sat back, letting out a breath she seemed to have been holding for years. She looked at her hands, then at me. The dynamic in the car shifted violently. I was no longer a charity case, I was a player. "Okinawa," she guessed. "Camp Hansen," I confirmed. 3 years. I had a local girlfriend. She taught me. "You have a good ear, Liam O'Connor," she murmured. "Kenji has been with me for a decade, and you caught him in a lie in 10 seconds. Desperation makes you pay attention to details," I said. "Now please, let me out. I helped you. We're even. I need to get to the pharmacy." "You saved my life," she corrected. "We are not even. We are—" My phone buzzed in my pocket, cutting her off. I pulled it out. "Mrs. Gable." I answered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Mrs. Gable, is she okay?" "Liam." The old woman's voice was shaking, high and thin with terror. "She's convulsing. The fever. It spiked so fast." Her eyes rolled back. "I don't know what to do." The world dropped out from under me. The car, the Yakuza, the rain, it all vanished. There was only the image of Maya, small and helpless, shaking in the dark. "I'm coming," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Call 911. No, wait, they won't come in time." I looked at the rain-streaked window, realizing how far we were from my apartment. "Keep her on her side. Do not let her choke." I hung up, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone. I grabbed the door handle, clawing at it. Locked. "Open the door!" I roared, turning on Kaori. "Open the goddamn door!" "You are 20 blocks away," she said, her voice calm but her eyes sharp, tracking my panic. "You cannot run that fast." "My daughter is seizing," I yelled, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. "I don't care about your wars. I have to get to her." I was ready to break the window. I was ready to strangle the driver. The monster inside me, the one I kept chained up for Maya's sake, was tearing at the bars. Kaori looked at me. For the first time, the mask of the queen slipped completely. She didn't see a servant. She saw a father staring into the abyss. She picked up her phone. She didn't dial a number. She pressed a speed dial. "Dr. Arisato," she said. "Code red. Location." She snapped her fingers at me. "4th and Vine," I choked out. "Apartment 2B. 4th and Vine, Apartment 2B. Pediatric seizure. You have 4 minutes. If the child dies, do not bother resigning. Just leave the country." She hung up and tapped the partition. "Drive fast." The engine roared, a true guttural sound of power. The car surged forward, pinning me to the seat. "Arisato is the best trauma surgeon in the city," Kaori said, smoothing her silk skirt. "He is closer to your apartment than any ambulance. He carries a mobile ICU in his trunk." I slumped back, covering my face with my hands. I couldn't breathe. "Why?" "Because," she said softly, "loyalty is a currency I am currently lacking, and I think you have a surplus." The car tore through the city, running red lights with impunity. The driver was a professional. The ride was smooth despite the speed. "You are in a trap, Liam," Kaori said, her voice cutting through my terror. "You are broke. Your wife is coming for your child. You have no allies, and tonight you made an enemy of my head of security." I lowered my hands. I looked at her. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered. "No one asks for the fire," she said, "but we must all decide if we will burn or forge ourselves." The car screeched to a halt in front of my building. A black van was already there, hazard lights flashing. Men in dark scrubs were running into the lobby with a medical case. "Go," she said. I scrambled for the door. "Liam," she called out as I stepped into the rain. I turned. "When she is stable," she said, her eyes locking onto mine with the weight of a contract being signed in blood, "pack a bag. For both of you." "What?" "You cannot stay here. Kenji will know you exposed him. He will come for you and your wife. She will use this medical emergency to prove you are unfit." The rain hammered down on us. She leaned forward into the light. "I need a new head of security. You need a fortress. My estate has both." "I'm not a criminal," I said, the protest weak even to my own ears. "You are a father," she replied. "Tonight that is the same thing." She pointed to the building. "Go. Save your daughter. Then accept your fate." I turned and ran toward the door, taking the stairs 2 at a time, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't know then that I was running away from the only life I had ever known. I didn't know that by the time the sun rose, I would be a soldier in a war I didn't understand. I only knew that the Queen had spoken, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting alone. The journey from the crumbling pavement of my old life to the stratosphere of hers happened not in a car, but in a helicopter. The Maybach had driven us to a private airfield in Teterboro, where the sleek, black machine waited like a dormant insect under the rain. The rotors sliced through the heavy November air, a rhythmic thumping that drowned out the chaos of the last hour. I sat in the leather bucket seat, Maya strapped in beside me. She was sedated, her small head resting heavily against my shoulder, the IV line from Dr. Arisato's mobile unit still taped to her hand. She was safe. The fever had broken in the van, snapped by the potent cocktail of drugs that cost more than my annual rent. I looked out the window. The city was a grid of lights below us, millions of lives being lived in boxes I could no longer afford. We were rising above it, detaching from the reality of eviction notices and custody battles. Beside me, Kaori Tanaka sat with her headset on, reviewing documents on a tablet. She looked as comfortable suspended 2,000 feet in the air as she did in the VIP booth. She didn't look at me, but I felt her presence like a change in atmospheric pressure. We flew north, leaving the city sprawl for the darkness of the woodlands. After 40 minutes, the helicopter banked, descending toward a ridge of mountains I couldn't identify. The estate revealed itself in stages, first a perimeter of high walls topped with sensors that blinked red in the night. Then the grounds, acres of manicured darkness, shadowy shapes of trees, and the glint of water. Finally, the main house. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress disguised as a sanctuary. It was modern, constructed of glass, steel, and dark stone, but the lines were distinctly Japanese. Low-slung roofs with wide eaves, timber framing that echoed ancient temples, and a central courtyard that seemed to pull the mountain into the structure itself. It was beautiful, intimidating, and utterly isolating. As we touched down on the private pad, the reception was military in its precision. Men in suits, not the hired muscle of a nightclub, but disciplined soldiers, were waiting. They didn't speak. They moved. "The medical team will take her to the West Wing," Kaori said, removing her headset. Her voice was the first sound I'd heard in nearly an hour that wasn't the engine's roar. "It has been equipped as a pediatric suite." "I'm staying with her," I said, the protective instinct flaring up instantly. I expected nothing less. She unbuckled her belt. "Hana will show you the way." An older woman stood by the helicopter doors as they opened. She wore a severe black suit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun that pulled at her eyes. She bowed to Kaori, a deep 90-degree bend held for a full 3 seconds, then turned to me with a gaze that could strip paint. "O'Connor-san," she said. "Follow me." We moved through the house. The interior was a hushed world of sensory overload. The floors were polished slate that seemed to absorb the sound of our footsteps. The walls were adorned with art that belonged in museums, ink-wash paintings that looked centuries old, abstract sculptures of twisted iron, and a suit of samurai armor standing sentinel in a hallway illuminated by floor lights. It smelled of cedar, rain, and the faint lingering scent of incense. Every staff member we passed stopped, pressed themselves against the wall, and bowed. They didn't look at Kaori. They feared her. But more than that, they revered her. I was walking in the wake of a deity. We reached the West Wing. The room they had prepared for Maya was larger than my entire apartment. It was soft, lit by warm lamps, with a bed that looked like a cloud. The medical equipment was discreetly tucked away, but present. A nurse was already there, checking monitors. "Your quarters are adjoining," Hana said, pointing to a sliding door. "Lady Tanaka has requested you join her in the main dining hall when the child is settled. Do not keep her waiting." I walked into my room. It was a masterpiece of minimalism. A low platform bed, a wall of glass overlooking a koi pond, and a bathroom stocked with toiletries that smelled of sandalwood. On the bed lay a suit, charcoal grey, Italian wool. Beside it, a crisp white shirt and a pair of black Oxfords. There was a note on the pillow, written in elegant sharp cursive, "Burn the clothes you arrived in." K. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by millions of dollars of architecture, my daughter sleeping safely in the next room, and I felt a profound sense of vertigo. I had stepped through a looking glass, and I knew with a terrifying certainty that the door behind me had welded shut. The next morning the sun broke over the mountain ridge, flooding the estate with a pale winter light. I had slept in a chair beside Maya's bed, unable to let go of her hand. When I woke, the fever was gone. She was weak, pale, but her eyes were clear. "Daddy," she rasped. "Where are we? Is this a hotel?" "Something like that, baby," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "It's a friend's house." "It's huge," she whispered, looking at the high ceiling. A soft knock at the sliding door interrupted us. I tensed, my body blocking Maya's view instantly. It was Kaori. She looked different. She wasn't wearing the armor of her business suits. She wore a silk kimono in deep indigo, embroidered with silver cranes. Her hair was loose, softening the sharp angles of her face. In her hands she held a lacquered tray. "I brought breakfast," she said softly. "Hospital food is good for the body, but bad for the soul." She entered the room, not with the stride of a queen, but with the quiet grace of a guest. She knelt beside the bed, placing the tray on the nightstand. It held 2 bowls of steaming rice porridge, okayu, topped with pickled plums and slices of sweet omelette. "Who are you?" Maya asked, blinking at the woman. "I am Kaori," she said, offering a small, polite bow to the 5-year-old. "You are Maya. I have heard you are very brave." Maya hid half her face behind her stuffed rabbit. "I'm not brave." I cried. "Crying does not mean you are not brave," Kaori said, her voice dropping to a register I hadn't heard before. Warm, textured, human. "It means you are fighting something hard." She reached into the wide sleeve of her kimono and pulled out a square of bright red paper. Her fingers, usually so dangerous, moved with dazzling speed and precision. Fold, crease, turn. In 30 seconds, she held a perfect paper crane in her palm. "In my country," Kaori said, placing the crane on Maya's blanket, "we believe these birds carry our wishes to heaven. If you fold 1,000, you get a wish." Maya reached out, touching the paper wing with awe. 1,000 is a lot." "Then we shall start with 1, Kaori smiled. It wasn't the terrifying smirk she gave her enemies. It was genuine. "Eat your okayu, Maya-chan. It will make you strong." I stood in the corner, feeling like an intruder in my own life. I watched the most dangerous woman in the hemisphere coax my daughter into eating with a gentleness that made my chest ache. I had spent the last 24 hours terrified of her power. I hadn't prepared for her kindness. It disarmed me more effectively than any gun. "She likes you," I said later, as I walked Kaori to the door. "Children have good instincts," she said, the mask slipping back into place, though not fully. "They know who will protect them." "Thank you," I said. The words felt inadequate. "For the doctor, for the room, for this." She looked at me, her dark eyes searching mine. "Do not thank me yet, Liam. You have not seen the bill." I thought I was working it off. "You are," she said. "But the cost of admission to this life is not just labor. It is your peace of mind." 3 days later, I found out what she meant. I was exploring the grounds, trying to memorize the layout for security purposes. I found Kaori in a secluded part of the garden, a small enclosure of moss and stone hidden behind a grove of bamboo. She was standing before a stone shrine. It was old, weathered, covered in moss. Incense burned in a small bronze brazier, the smoke curling up into the grey sky. She stood motionless, her eyes closed, her hands clasped in prayer. I turned to leave, not wanting to intrude, but a twig snapped under my boot. She didn't jump. She simply opened her eyes. "Come." I walked over, standing a respectful distance away. The shrine was simple. A stone lantern, a small basin of water, and a wooden plaque with names carved into it. 2 names. "My husband, Takeshi," she said, tracing the first set of characters. "And my son, Kenzo." The air left my lungs. A son. "I didn't know," I said softly. "Why would you?" She turned to look at the water basin. It happened 12 years ago. A dispute over territory in Osaka. My husband was a stubborn man. He refused to concede a port. Our enemies decided that if he would not yield the business, they would take his legacy. She spoke with a chilling detachment, as if recounting a weather report, but I saw the tension in her jaw, the way her knuckles whitened as she gripped her own hands. "They intercepted the car coming home from school," she continued. "Kenzo was 7. The same age Maya will be in 2 years. The parallel hit me like a physical blow. 7, just a baby. I was not the queen then," she said, looking at me. "I was a wife, a mother. I managed the books. I arranged the flower displays. But when they died, something in me died too, and something else woke up." She stepped closer to me. The scent of jasmine and rain was overwhelming. "I hunted them down," she whispered. "Every single man involved. The driver, the shooter, the man who gave the order, the man who financed it. It took me 3 years. I burned their world to ash. And when I was done, I looked around and realized I was the only one left standing atop the pile." She looked at the shrine one last time. "You asked why I helped you, Liam, why I let a stranger into my home." She reached out, her hand hovering near my arm before dropping back to her side. "Because when I saw you in that bar, ready to bleed for a stranger, terrified for your child, I saw the man my husband should have been. And I saw the father I wish my son had had in his final moments." She looked at me with a vulnerability that was terrifying in its intensity. "You are fighting for her," she said. "Do not stop, because the silence that comes after you lose, it is deafening." I looked at the stone names, then at the woman who had turned her grief into an empire. I understood then she wasn't collecting a debt. She was trying to save a ghost. "I won't let anyone take her," I promised. "Not Sarah, not the courts, not anyone." "Good," she said, the steel returning to her voice, "because now you have my army to ensure it." The first week passed in a blur of routine and revelation. We fell into a rhythm. Mornings were for Maya. Breakfast in the solarium, cartoons on a screen the size of a billboard. Kaori would join us for coffee, reading briefing papers while Maya colored. Days were for work. Kaori didn't just give me a title, she put me to use. She discovered quickly that my military background gave me an eye for logistics she lacked. I spent hours in her study, reviewing security protocols, auditing the guard rotations and finding holes in her perimeter. "You have a blind spot on the North Ridge," I told her one evening, pointing to the topographic map on her desk. "The sensors are angled too high. A drone could come in under the radar deck." "Fix it," she commanded, not looking up from her ledger. I already did. I had the team recalibrate the sensors and add a thermal overlay. She looked up then. A small, approving smile played on her lips. Efficient. Evenings were the most dangerous time. After Maya was asleep, the house grew quiet. The staff retreated to their quarters. It was just us, drifting through the vast, empty rooms. I had adapted to the wardrobe. The suits she provided fit like a second skin. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the exhausted bartender anymore. I saw a man who looked dangerous, a man who belonged here. The staff treated me with a deference that made me uncomfortable. To them, I was the man who had ousted Kenji, the traitor. Rumors swirled that I was Kaori's secret lover, or a hired assassin from America. I did nothing to dispel them. In this world, reputation was armor. But it was the small moments that eroded my defenses. It was the way she would hand me a file, her fingers brushing mine, lingering for a microsecond too long. It was the way she looked at me across the dinner table, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes, creating an intimacy that felt illegal. One night, we were in the library. I was on a ladder, checking the window locks, an unnecessary task, but I needed to keep my hands busy. I slipped, my dress shoe losing traction on the polished wood rung. I fell backward. I expected to hit the floor. Instead, I felt hands on my back, surprisingly strong, steadying me. I turned. Kaori was there. She had moved across the room with that supernatural speed of hers. Her hands were pressed against my lower back, her face inches from mine. "Careful, Liam," she murmured. Her voice was husky, low. "We cannot have our protector breaking his neck." My heart hammered against my ribs, loud enough for her to hear. I could smell her, that intoxicating mix of ozone and expensive perfume. I could feel the heat of her body radiating through the silk of her blouse. "I'm fine," I stammered, stepping away, breaking the contact. My skin burned where she had touched me. She watched me retreat, a knowing look in her eyes. She didn't pursue it. She didn't have to. We both knew the gravity in the room was shifting, pulling us toward a collision neither of us was ready for. The bubble burst on the 8th day. I was in the command center, a room in the basement filled with monitors, when the proximity alarm blared. "Vehicle at the main gate," the guard on duty announced. "Courier, scan it," I ordered, stepping up to the console. The X-ray showed paper, just paper. "Let the courier drop it in the box. Do not open the gate." 10 minutes later, the envelope was on Kaori's desk. It was thick, heavy, and bore the seal of a New York family court. But it wasn't just legal papers. Kaori opened it with a letter opener that looked like a dagger. She slid the contents out. Photographs spilled onto the mahogany. My blood ran cold. They were photos of Maya, in the garden, eating breakfast in the solarium, sleeping in her bed here. They were taken from a distance, likely with a high-powered lens from the surrounding mountains. But the message was clear. "We see you. You are not safe." "Sarah," I whispered, nausea roiling in my gut. "No," Kaori said, her voice ice. She picked up a photo of Maya. "Your ex-wife does not have the resources for this kind of surveillance. This is professional. This is military grade." She flipped one photo over. On the back, written in black marker, was a single Japanese character, Uragirimono, traitor. "Kenji," she spat the name. "He has gone to the Yamashiro clan. My rivals. They are using your ex-wife's legal claim as a cover to target me. They know you are my weakness now." She slammed her hand down on the desk. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "Lock down the estate," she ordered, speaking into her comms. "Condition black. Nobody in or out. Move the child to the panic room." "Kaori," I said, stepping forward, "if they have eyes on the inside." "They don't," she turned to me, her eyes blazing with a ferocity that scared me. "These were taken from the North Ridge, the blind spot you found. They were watching before you fixed it." She walked around the desk and grabbed the lapels of my jacket, pulling me down to her level. Her face was a mask of fury and possession. "They think they can use you to get to me," she hissed. "They think because you are a father. You are soft. They think I will trade my empire for your safety." "Will you?" I asked, the question hanging in the air. She didn't answer. She simply released me and turned to the window. "You are under my protection, Liam. That means if the devil himself comes for you, he will have to climb over my corpse. Prepare your gear. Tonight we do not sleep." The house was a tomb of tension. The shutters were sealed. Armed guards patrolled every corridor. Maya was asleep in the panic room, unaware of the war brewing around her. I found Kaori in the small tea room off the master suite at 2:00 a.m. She was pouring whiskey, not tea, a bottle of Hibiki 30-year. "Drink," she said, sliding a glass across the low table. I sat opposite her. The liquid was amber fire in my throat. "We have to leave," and I said. "If they know where we are, this place is a target. I can't keep Maya here." "I know," she said quietly. "The jet is being prepped. We fly to Kyoto tomorrow. My stronghold there is impenetrable." "Kyoto?" I choked. "I can't take her to Japan. I don't have a passport for her. The custody battle." "The custody battle is irrelevant if you are dead," she countered. I have arranged new papers. For both of you, passports, identities, you will be safe. You're asking me to kidnap my own daughter, I said, rubbing my temples. To become a fugitive. I am asking you to survive. She stood up and walked around the table. She stopped beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder. This time I didn't pull away. You are a good man, Liam, she whispered. Too good for this world. But you are in my world now, and in my world we do not ask for permission. We take what we must to protect what we love. I looked up at her. Her face was soft in the dim light, stripped of the anger from earlier. She looked exhausted. She looked lonely. Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. Why go this far for us? Because, she leaned down, her face inches from mine. You make me remember what it feels like to have a heart, and I am terrified that if you leave, I will turn back into stone. The air between us crackled. The danger outside the walls faded. The only danger that mattered was the woman standing before me. I stood up. We were chest to chest. I could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. I could see the slight part of her lips. The attraction that had been simmering for days boiled over. It wasn't just gratitude. It wasn't just lust. It was a desperate, clawing need to connect with the only other person on earth who understood the weight of the night. She tilted her head up. Her hand came up to cup my jaw, her thumb tracing my lower lip. Liam, she breathed. I leaned in. My hand found the small of her back, pulling her flush against me. She felt fragile and indestructible all at once. Our breath mingled. I wanted to kiss her. I wanted to lose myself in her. But then, the image of Maya flashed in my mind. Maya, sleeping in a steel room downstairs. Maya, whose mother would use this, me sleeping with a crime lord, to take her away forever. I froze. My lips were millimeters from hers. I could feel her heat. I can't, I whispered, the words tearing out of my throat. I pulled back, my hands dropping from her waist. If I do this, if I cross this line, I lose the high ground. I lose the only thing keeping me sane. Kari didn't move. She didn't look rejected. She looked resigned. Honor, she murmured, a sad smile touching her lips. It is a heavy coat to wear in winter. She stepped back, the distance between us suddenly feeling like miles. Go to your daughter, she said, her voice regaining its command. Sleep. Tomorrow, everything changes. I didn't sleep. I sat by the door of the panic room, my gun on the floor beside me, listening to the silence. At 5:00 a.m., the silence broke, not with an alarm, but with a phone call, Kaori's personal line. She answered it in the hallway. I heard her gasp, a sound I didn't think she was capable of making. I opened the door. She was standing in the corridor, her face pale, the phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. What is it? I asked, stepping out. Kenji, she said, her voice trembling with rage. He didn't just sell the photos. He sold the flight plan. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear, real unadulterated fear. They are waiting for us at the airfield, she said. If we try to fly to Kyoto, we will be shot out of the sky. So we're trapped, I said, my hand going to my weapon. No. She shook her head, her eyes hardening into diamonds. We are not trapped. We are cornered. And a tiger is most dangerous when it is cornered. She walked toward me, grabbing my arm. Pack the bag, Liam. We are not going to the airfield. We are going into the city, to the heart of their territory. Are you insane? No, she said. I am finished running. She looked down the hall toward where Maya slept. They threatened a child, she whispered, and the temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. So I am going to remind them why I am the queen, and you. You are going to help me bury them. She turned and walked toward the armory, her silk kimono flowing behind her like a shroud. Coming, O'Connor? I looked at the panic room door, then at the woman walking into the darkness. I took a deep breath, grabbed my jacket, and followed her. Whatever happens, I said to her back, I'm with you. I didn't know then that by the end of the day I would have blood on my hands that would never wash off. But as I followed her into the dark, I realized I didn't care. The trap was sprung in the skeletal remains of an industrial dry dock in Queens. It was a cathedral of rust and shadows, smelling of salt water and decaying metal. We walked into the center of the kill box, our footsteps echoing against the corrugated iron roof like gunshots. Kaori moved with a terrifying calm, her heels clicking a steady rhythm. I walked a step behind her, my hand hovering near the Glock concealed beneath my jacket. My senses were redlining. The acoustics were wrong. The silence was too heavy, too curated. "They are late," Kaori said, checking her watch. Her voice didn't echo. It cut. "They're here," I whispered, scanning the catwalks. "Kaori, get behind me." "I do not hide, Liam," she replied, not breaking stride. "We are here to draw the infection out." Floodlights snapped on from the rafters, a blinding wash of aggressive white light that seared my retinas. I flinched, drawing my weapon instinctively, shielding my eyes. "I told them," a voice echoed from the darkness. "I told the Yamashiro that the Queen's arrogance would be her coffin." Kenji stepped into the light between two parked SUVs. He wasn't wearing his suit. He wore tactical gear, and in his hand was a heavy-caliber pistol. Flanking him were 6 mercenaries, their faces masked, rifles raised. But it wasn't the guns that stopped my heart. It was the woman standing behind Kenji, shivering in a beige trench coat. Sarah. My ex-wife saw me and let out a strangled sob. "Liam? Oh God, Liam!" "Sarah?" The name tore out of my throat. My grip on the gun faltered. "What are you doing here?" "They said—" She was shaking violently, her eyes darting between the gunman and me. "They said you stole Maya. They said if I helped them find you, I could take her home tonight." I looked at Kenji. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal. He had weaponized my past to destroy my future. "You are predictable, O'Connor," Kenji sneered, leveling his gun at me. "A father will always walk into the fire for the mother of his child, even if he hates her." "Let her go," I shouted, stepping forward. "She's a civilian. She has nothing to do with this." "She is leverage," Kenji spat. "Drop the gun, Liam, or she dies first." He grabbed Sarah by the hair, jerking her in front of him, pressing the barrel into her neck. Sarah screamed, a sound of pure terror that froze my blood. "I said drop it." I looked at Kaori. She was motionless, watching Kenji with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a rabid dog. But I couldn't gamble. "Okay," I choked out. I slowly crouched, placing my weapon on the concrete. "It's down. Just don't hurt her." Kenji smiled. It was a grotesque, triumphant thing. "Now, the Queen. On your knees." He shifted his aim, pointing the gun squarely at Kaori's chest. "Kneel!" he roared. "Or the American dies next." The air in the dock solidified. Time seemed to warp, stretching under the weight of the violence about to unfold. Kaori looked at the gun aimed at her heart. Then she looked at me. There was no fear in her eyes, only a profound, terrifying disappointment. "You have made 3 mistakes tonight, Kenji," Kaori said. Her voice was conversational, barely loud enough to be heard over the wind rattling the roof. "Shut up!" Kenji's hand shook. "Kneel." "Mistake 1. You involved civilians," she listed, taking a step forward. The mercenaries tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. "Stay back." "Mistake 2. You assumed I came alone." A red dot appeared on Kenji's forehead, then another on the chest of the mercenary to his right, then 3 more. From the dark catwalks above, the ones I had thought were empty, shadows moved. Kaori's loyalists, the ones Kenji thought he had turned. Kenji's eyes widened. Impossible. They swore loyalty to Yamashiro. "They swore loyalty to the highest bidder," Kaori corrected, taking another step. "I simply outbid you an hour ago." "You?" Kenji backed up, dragging Sarah with him. Panic shattered his composure. "I'll kill her, I swear I'll kill her." "And that," Kaori said, stopping 5 feet from him, "is mistake 3. She looked at Sarah, who was sobbing hysterically, paralyzed by the gun at her throat. "You touched what belongs to him," Kaori whispered, her voice dropping to a register that was pure ice. "And by extension, you touched what belongs to me." "Stay back!" Kenji shrieked, pressing the gun harder. I tensed to lunge, but Kaori moved first. It was a blur. She didn't lunge, she flowed. She stepped inside Kenji's guard with a speed that defied physics. Her left hand clamped over the slide of his pistol, pushing it offline just as it discharged. Bang! The shot went wide, sparking off the concrete floor. Sarah screamed and scrambled away, crawling on her hands and knees. Kaori didn't let go. With a sickening crunch, she twisted Kenji's wrist. He howled, dropping the weapon. Before it hit the ground, Kaori drove her palm into his throat. Kenji gagged, stumbling back, clutching his crushed windpipe. He fell to his knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The mercenaries didn't move. They had lasers painted on their hearts. They knew checkmate when they saw it. They dropped their rifles, hands raised. Kaori stood over Kenji. She looked like a deity of vengeance, illuminated by the harsh white floodlights. She smoothed her silk blouse, which didn't have a single wrinkle. "I gave you a life, Kenji," she said, looking down at him. "I gave you a family, and you traded it for a promise from a rival who would have killed you tomorrow." Kenji reached up, grasping at the hem of her pants, begging without words. Kaori looked at me. "Take your wife. Get her to the car." "Kaori," I said, stepping forward. "We can turn him over to the police. You don't have to—" "Go!" she roared. The sound was raw, primal. It wasn't a request. It was a command to save my soul from what she was about to do. I grabbed Sarah. She was catatonic. "Liam," Sarah wept, clinging to me. "Who is she? What is this?" "Move, Sarah," I said, dragging her toward the exit. "Just move." As we reached the heavy steel doors, I looked back. Kaori picked up Kenji's fallen pistol. She didn't look malicious. She looked exhausted. She looked like a woman taking out the trash because no one else could be trusted to do it right. "Over my dead body," she whispered to the man who had threatened us. Bang! The sound echoed through the warehouse, a final period on the sentence of our past lives. I didn't flinch. I pushed Sarah through the door and into the night. We dropped Sarah at a police precinct 3 blocks away. I told her simply, "Go back to Connecticut. If you ever try to take Maya again, the lawyers won't be the ones who stop you." She didn't argue. She had seen the devil, and she knew I held the leash. The drive back to the safe house, a penthouse in Manhattan, was silent. Kaori stared out the window watching the rain. Her hand rested on the leather seat between us, trembling slightly. When we entered the penthouse, the adrenaline finally crashed. Kaori walked straight to the wet bar. She tried to pour water, but the pitcher rattled against the glass. She slammed it down, water splashing onto the marble. "Damn it," she hissed, gripping the counter until her knuckles turned white. "Let me," I said. "I lost control," she said, refusing to look at me. Her voice was tight, brittle. "You saved us," I countered, walking toward her. I hesitated. She spun around, her eyes blazing with a frantic intensity. "When he pointed the gun at you." I froze, Liam. For a microsecond, I calculated the trajectory, and instead of moving, I froze. She paced the room, shedding her jacket. "I am the Oyabun," she said, tapping her chest. "I am supposed to be ice. But tonight I was terrified. Not of dying. I was terrified that if I moved too soon, the bullet would hit you." "You're human," I said. "I cannot afford to be human," she shouted. "Humanity gets people killed. Humanity is why Kenzo is dead." "Is that what I am?" I asked quietly. "A weakness?" She stopped pacing. She looked at me across the room, her chest heaving. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. "No," she whispered. "You are the only thing that feels real." She looked down at her hands. There was a smear of blood on her cuff. She stared at it with revulsion. "I am a monster, Liam," she said softly. "You saw it tonight. I executed a man I once called brother. I didn't blink." "I saw a woman protecting her family," I said. I walked until I was standing inside her personal space. I took her cold hands in mine. "I'm not afraid of you, Kaori," I said. "I'm afraid for you." She looked up at me, vulnerable in a way I knew no one else had ever seen. "You should be afraid," she murmured. "I destroy everything I touch." "Then destroy me." The air between us ignited. She made a sound, half sob, half gasp, and surged forward. her hands tangled in my hair, pulling my face down to hers. Our lips met with the force of a collision. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. It was the taste of survival, of adrenaline, of two people who had just walked through fire and were checking to see if they were still alive. She tasted like whiskey and danger. Her mouth was hot, demanding. I wrapped my arms around her waist, lifting her up, pressing her against the marble counter. She wrapped her legs around me, pulling me closer, trying to merge our bodies into one. "Liam," she moaned against my mouth. "Liam, I've got you," I whispered against her neck. "I've got you." My hands roamed over her back, feeling the tension in her muscles. She wasn't the queen now. She was just Kaori. She was trembling, alive, and she was mine. She pulled back slightly, breathing hard, her forehead resting against mine. Her eyes were dark pools of desire. "I wanted to do this from the moment you wiped the blood off your lip in the club," she confessed, her voice husky. "I wanted to do this from the moment you told me to get in the car," I admitted. She kissed me again, softer this time. A promise, a claim. Her fingers traced the bruise on my cheek. "You are hurt," she whispered. "I'm fine," I said. "Are you?" "I am. Better." We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the dim light, the city rain beating against the glass. The violence of the warehouse felt 1,000,000 miles away. Here, there was only the warmth of her skin and the steady beat of her heart against mine. Kaori pulled away slowly. The vulnerability was still there, but the steel was returning to her spine. She walked to the window. "Kenji is dead," she said, her back to me. "But the Yamashiro clan is not. They will view this as an act of war. They will come for me with everything they have." She turned to face me. The lover was gone, the strategist had returned, but her eyes were sad. "I can get you out, Liam," she said. My stomach dropped. "What?" "I have a plane waiting at Teterboro," she said quickly. "It can take you and Maya to Zurich. I have accounts there in your name. New passports, enough money to live comfortably for 3 lifetimes. You're sending me away." "I'm offering you a life," she pleaded, stepping toward me. "Look at what happened tonight. Sarah was almost killed. You were almost killed. This is my reality, Liam. Blood, betrayal. Maya deserves better. You deserve better." She reached out, touching my chest. "Go to Zurich. Raise your daughter. Find a woman who doesn't have a target on her back. Be happy." "And you?" I asked. "What happens to you?" "I stay," she said simply. "I finish the war. I burn the Yamashiro to the ground." "Alone," I said. "I have always been alone," she replied. "It is my nature." I looked at her. I saw the fear behind the offer. She wasn't trying to save me. She was trying to save herself from the pain of losing me later. She was pushing me away before death could rip me away. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope she had placed in my jacket earlier. The tickets. I held them up. She watched me, holding her breath. I ripped them in half, then in quarters. I let the pieces fall to the expensive rug like snow. "Liam," she breathed. "I'm not going to Zurich," I said firmly. "And I'm not leaving you to fight a war alone." "You are a fool," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "You are choosing a target." "I'm choosing a family," I corrected. "Sarah is gone. She won't challenge me for Maya again. My place is here, with you." I stepped closer, taking her face in my hands. "You said you saw the man your husband should have been," I reminded her. "Well, that man doesn't run. He stands, over your dead body. No, Kaori, over our dead bodies." She stared at me, trembling. Then she let out a shuddering breath and collapsed into me, burying her face in my chest. "Okay," she whispered into my shirt. "Okay." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. The sadness was gone, replaced by a fierce, terrifying resolve. "If you stay," she said, "you are no longer a civilian, you are my partner. And tomorrow we do not defend, we attack." "I'm ready," I said. "Good," she replied, looking out at the city lights. "Because tomorrow we are going to set this city on fire." I stood beside her, looking at the reflection of the two of us in the glass, the queen and her soldier. I didn't know if we would survive the week, but as I took her hand, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally home. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan penthouse, turning the glass into a sheet of gold. It was a stark, blinding contrast to the grey rain that had defined my life for so long. I stood by the kitchen island, brewing coffee in a machine that probably cost more than my old car. I was wearing only a pair of sweatpants, my chest bare, the bruising from the warehouse fight beginning to bloom into shades of purple and yellow across my ribs. Kaori was already awake. She sat at the dining table, which was still covered in the topographic maps and supply manifests we had studied until 3:00 a.m. She was wearing my white dress shirt, the one I had nearly been fired in just days ago. It hung loosely on her frame, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, making her look deceptively small. "The coffee is weak," she noted without looking up from her tablet, though she took a sip anyway. "It's American," I replied, bringing the pot over to refill her mug. I leaned down, kissing the top of her head. She leaned back into the touch, a subconscious movement that told me more about our new reality than any declaration of love could. "We'll get the good stuff when we go back to the estate." "If we go back," she corrected, swiping across a digital map. "The Yamashiro clan has mobilized their assets in the harbor. They are blocking my shipping lanes. They think I'm hiding in this penthouse, licking my wounds." "Let them think that," I said, sliding into the chair next to her. I pulled a map toward me. "While they're watching the front door, we're going to dismantle the foundation." I pointed to the logistics hub in Jersey City. "You said their money flows through here, legitimate imports masking the contraband." "Yes." "I made some calls," I said. "Old contacts from the Corps who work in customs enforcement now. They're looking for a bus to make their quarter, if we feed them the manifest numbers for the Yamashiro containers." Kaori looked at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized her mate also had teeth. "You would use the federal government as your personal weapon?" she asked, amused. "I'm using every tool in the box," I said, my voice hardening. "I told you, Kaori, we're on offense now. We burn them down, legally, financially, and physically." She reached out, her cool fingers tracing the bruise on my chest. "You have adapted quickly, Liam." "I didn't have a choice," I said, capturing her hand. "They came for my family." The war didn't last long. It couldn't. We hit them with a velocity they never anticipated. Over the next week, the Yamashiro Empire crumbled, not with a bang, but with a series of catastrophic structural failures. On Tuesday, Customs seized $40 million in assets at the Newark docks, acting on an anonymous tip that I had phoned in from a burner cell. On Wednesday, their primary financial backer in Tokyo pulled out, spooked by the sudden instability and a private conversation Kaori had with him in fluent, terrifyingly polite Japanese. By Friday, the Yamashiro Oyabun requested a parley. Kaori declined. She sent a single message back: "Leave the city by midnight or stay in it forever." They left. But the final threat wasn't a crime lord. It was Sarah. We met her in a conference room at a high-end law firm in Midtown. Kaori didn't bring armed guards. She brought 3 of the most vicious corporate litigators in New York. I sat at the head of the table, Kaori to my right. Sarah sat opposite us, flanked by her husband's expensive but clearly outmatched attorney. Sarah looked tired. The encounter at the warehouse had broken something in her. She kept glancing at Kaori with terrified awe, unable to reconcile the elegant woman in the Dior suit with the force of nature that had snapped a man's wrist like a twig. "The terms are simple," Kaori's lead lawyer said, sliding a thick document across the mahogany. "Full physical and legal custody to Mr. O'Connor. You retain visitation rights, supervised once a month. Pending a psychological evaluation, you will publicly retract all allegations of negligence. In exchange, Mr. O'Connor will not press charges for kidnapping, conspiracy, or endangerment of a minor regarding the incident at the warehouse." Sarah's lawyer bristled. "This is preposterous. My client was a victim." "Your client," Kaori spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper, yet it silenced the room instantly. "Your client led a hit squad to my doorstep. She used her daughter as bait." Kaori leaned forward, locking eyes with Sarah. "Sign the papers, Mrs. Gable, or I will release the security footage of you standing by while a gunman held a pistol to your ex-husband's head. I imagine your current husband's hedge fund would find that kind of publicity inconvenient." Sarah went pale. She looked at me, searching for the pushover she used to know, the man who apologized for things he didn't do. "Liam," she pleaded. "Sign it, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. I didn't feel hate anymore. I just felt a profound need to be done. "You wanted a fight, you lost. Don't make me destroy you completely." She picked up the pen. Her hand shook, but she signed. When we walked out of that building into the crisp autumn air, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying for 5 years. I took a deep breath, tasting the exhaust and the cold wind. It tasted like freedom. "Are you all right?" Kaori asked, adjusting her sunglasses. "I should feel guilty," I admitted, looking back at the building. "I just stripped a mother of her rights." "You stripped a danger of its weapon," she corrected. She took my arm, guiding me toward the waiting car. "Do not confuse pity with morality, Liam. You did what was necessary." Life settled into a rhythm that was bizarre, dangerous, and perfect. We moved back to the estate, but things were different. The atmosphere of sterile isolation was gone. The house felt lived in. Toys were scattered in the solarium. The sound of cartoons echoed down the halls on Saturday mornings. I didn't go back to the Sapphire Lounge. I took a formal position within the Tanaka Corporation. Officially, I was the director of North American logistics. Unofficially, I was Kaori's right hand, her strategist, and the final wall of defense between her and the world. The staff treated me with a reverence that took months to get used to. I wasn't just the American boyfriend. I was the man who had stood beside the queen in the fire. Even Hana, the severe housekeeper, began to leave extra servings of dinner for me, a silent nod of approval. My integration into her world wasn't just professional, it was total. I learned the language, not just the bar slang I knew, but the formal, intricate Japanese of the business world. I learned the customs, the hierarchy, the silence that spoke louder than words. And Maya thrived. The estate became her kingdom. She had private tutors, piano lessons, and acres of secure grounds to explore. But more than the luxury, she had safety. She no longer flinched when the phone rang. She no longer worried if we had enough milk. One afternoon, I watched from the balcony as Maya ran through the garden below. Kaori was walking with her, pointing out different koi fish in the pond. Maya said something, and Kaori threw her head back and laughed, a genuine, bright sound that carried on the wind. Maya reached up and held Kaori's hand. Kaori didn't stiffen. She squeezed back. "She calls her Kaori Mama now," a voice said beside me. I turned to see Kenji's replacement, a stoic man named Hiro standing there. "I know," I said, watching them. "It is good," Hiro noted, staring at the horizon. "The house used to be cold. Now it has a heartbeat." I looked at my hands. They were calloused, scarred, but steady. I had traded my soul for this life, or so I had thought. But looking at my daughter safe in the garden, holding the hand of the most dangerous woman I knew, I realized I hadn't lost my soul. I had finally found a place to keep it safe. That evening, after Maya was asleep, Kaori and I sat by the fire in the library. It had become our ritual, decompressing from the day, stripping away the titles of director and oyabun until we were just Liam and Kaori. She was reading a book, her legs draped over my lap. I was absent-mindedly rubbing her ankle, staring at the flames. "We are not normal people," she said suddenly, closing her book. "No," I agreed, "we're not." "Normal people do not have perimeter alarms," she mused. "Normal people do not have lawyers on retainer for kidnapping charges. Normal people do not have to wonder if the car started too loudly." "Does it bother you?" I asked. She looked at me, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "Sometimes I worry that I have dragged you into hell." "You didn't drag me," I said. I walked in, and besides, I leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Hell is only hell if you're burning alone. With you. It's just a place with good heating." She smiled, a soft, private expression she saved only for me. "I love you, Liam," she said. It was rare for her to say it out loud. She preferred to show it by destroying my enemies, but when she said it, it hit with the force of a decree. "I love you too," I said. "We are a strange fairy tale," she whispered, leaning into my touch. "We aren't a fairy tale," I corrected, pulling her close. "Fairy tales are for children who need to believe the world is safe. We're a fortress. We know the world isn't safe, so we built our own." She rested her head on my shoulder. "A fortress," she echoed. "I like that." We sat in the silence, two warriors who had finally put down their swords for the night, content in the knowledge that whatever came tomorrow, we would face it from the same side of the shield. 1 year later, the estate was transformed. It was the night of the Cherry Blossom Festival, an annual tradition Kaori had revived to signal the Tanaka clan's dominance and stability. Paper lanterns strung between the trees cast a soft amber glow over the grounds. The air smelled of spring rain, roasted pork and expensive sake. 300 guests, politicians, business tycoons and clan leaders mingled in the gardens, drinking to our health. I stood on the veranda, adjusting the cuffs of my tuxedo. I wore a small lapel pin, the crest of the Tanaka clan. It was no longer a disguise, it was my identity. "Daddy, look!" Maya came running up the steps. She was 6 now, taller, wearing a beautiful silk kimono with floral patterns. She looked radiant, confident, a world away from the sick, frightened child in the damp apartment. "You look beautiful, baby," I said, crouching down to hug her. "Kaori Mama said I can stay up until the fireworks," she beamed. "Then you can," I smiled. "Come," Kaori's voice came from behind me. I stood up. She was breathtaking. She wore a formal black kimono with gold embroidery, her hair swept up in a complex traditional style. She radiated power, beauty, and absolute authority. But when she looked at me, her eyes were warm. "The guests are waiting for the toast," she said, offering me her arm. "Let's go," I said, taking it. We walked out onto the main terrace together. The conversation below died down instantly. 300 faces turned up toward us. There was fear in some eyes, respect in others, but awe in all of them. They weren't just looking at the Queen anymore. They were looking at the King and Queen. I looked out over the crowd, then past them, to the perimeter wall, and beyond that to the lights of the city in the distance. I remembered the rain. I remembered the cold water leaking through the window on 4th Street. I remembered the despair of having $74 and a dying hope. I remembered the man I used to be, alone, afraid, with nothing but a prayer. I looked down at Kaori. She squeezed my arm, a silent signal of unity. I wasn't that man anymore. I was protected. I was powerful. I had everything I had ever fought for. The ex-wife had threatened to take my daughter. She had brought lawyers and threats. She thought she could break me, but she didn't know I would meet a woman in a bar. She didn't know I would step in front of a punch. She didn't know that 6 words would change the trajectory of the universe. I squeezed Kaori's hand back as the first firework bloomed in the sky above us, painting the world in gold, over my dead body. It turned out that was exactly the price I was willing to pay. And for this life, it was a bargain.